Hi,
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for joining all the way from the US. I hope
Yeah,
it isn't too early for you.
no, it's middle of the day here, so it's perfect.
Oh, perfect, perfect. So I don't think we've met before. We've just liaised over email. Uh, I'm Soumya, and I work as the health promotion coordinator at Black Beetle Health. And I'm so happy Harvey introduced both of us. Yeah, and I am so glad that I get to do this session with you. I've been learning a lot today from the previous sessions, and I seen that you joined the previous sessions as well, and you were there for that as well. So thank you so much for that. And I can't wait to hear your story. I can't wait to hear your experience and all of the lessons that I can learn from you as well and be inspired. Yeah. Would you mind giving a brief introduction about yourself to everyone who's here?
Absolutely, and it's so nice to meet you as well, Samya. My name is Ryan Lang. I'm a physician, health expert. I also am a creative and I'm a life coach focused on life transitions. And
Hmm.
I actually just rejoined Instagram actually last week. Started a new web show that's focused on inspiration and life transitions guidance. It's called Real Talk with Ryan. So for anyone who's on the live now, you can certainly follow me at Real Talk underscore Ryan. And I just released a new episode this morning, but it's really, really great to be here on this platform. I know Harvey very well. We go way back. So it's just such a privilege to be here and to share in during this National Coming Out Day that you all have planned.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much for being here and agreeing to do this with me. I'm new, so I've been learning a lot of things today, and it's changed a lot of things that I was exposed to, about the LGBTQ community and the challenges that they face, and the experiences that they've been through. It's been different for me, and it's different because I've never really given this a lot of thought that okay, people who identify as LGBTQ have to actually go through all of this to try and tell the world who they are, and make people accept them for who they are. So how's that journey been for you?
Yeah, it's been a learning journey, just for me as well as in the way of being in the community and learning sort of how to represent myself within the community and to those people outside of the community. So it's been a journey for sure. I can say that my coming out journey came fairly later in life. I'm 33 years old, and I started my coming out journey around the time that I was 29 years old. I'm sure that we'll get into a lot of the reasons for that during this conversation. But with that, certainly there were challenges around, sort of the run of the mill, sort of the normal things that you would expect to learn in terms of like how you, talk about relationships, how you sort of think about those different types of things that are, second nature for people who are outside of the community. And those things, certainly having to learn, on my own terms coming out later in life. So it was a journey. It still is a journey, but I'm really grateful to be where I am today in that regard.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I'm assuming, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming there would have been a lot of self discovery throughout the journey, and to try and to come to terms with the conflicting emotions within you as well, and to try and figure out okay who you are before you are able to tell the world who you are. So how has that part been? Just the internal reflection, the turmoil that you might have gone through, how has it been for you and for your mental health?
Yeah. So I would say that probably the last year for me has been transformational in terms of finding my identity, finding myself in terms of, what does it mean for me, in terms of being gay and identifying gay. What does that mean for me in terms of how I present myself, how I interact with other people in the community, and what I want to represent. So as you asked about, the impact on my mental health, certainly, because I grew up in a community that, being gay certainly wasn't even a reality that I could even see around me. I saw no examples around me of what it meant to be a gay man living a healthy and happy life.
Yeah.
To, sort of insert oneself into a community and have that support. And, growing up without that, I had to sort of find that in a sense and become more comfortable with going out and looking for the community that I needed. Sometimes that, thankfully came from people who were already around me.
Yeah.
Um, and a lot of times it meant I had to go out to places that I'd never gone before, do a lot of research on my own to sort of figure a lot of that stuff out. So, I will say that this last year, and, for a couple of years before that as well, but especially this last year, has been definitely experience in that journey of, trying to find myself and then also trying to understand what my true identity is.
Yeah. Was there something in particular that happened last year that helped you, have the experience that you did? Yeah.
Wow. Yes. So about a year and a half ago, I'll go back a little bit more. So I actually, as I said, started my coming out process around the time that I was about 29 years old, which was about 4 years ago. And I came out to my parents about 3 years ago. So that journey has not been easy. It was not easy. And I will say about a year and a half ago, I unfortunately, or, perhaps fortunately, depending on how you look at it, made the decision that I wasn't willing to put myself around other people who weren't fully supportive and embracing of who I am.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that included my parents, and in particular, my mother. So my mother did not and still does not accept who I am as a gay man. So up until that period of about a year and a half ago, I was trying to be patient with her and allowing her to come to her own terms in terms of what that meant and the reality of the situation, understanding that it took time for me to get to that point. But I saw that progress wasn't happening, and I was still enduring a lot of, to an extent, emotional abuse around not accepting who I am and not respecting who I am. So I made the decision to cut her and my father off about a year and a half ago. And I will say that period after making that decision was, first of all, a very isolating experience, as you might imagine. But that period of distancing myself from my parents, because in a sense, up until that point, I had done so much to please my parents, to try to live up to what their expectations of me would be. And we could have a whole conversation about that separately. But I felt that my opportunity in distancing myself from them allowed me to look inwardly, look internally, and say, okay, what kind of person do I want to be? Who do I want to be in the world without other people trying to dictate what that might look like for me? So having that time away from my parents and away from my family was that opportunity over the last year for me to really be able to have the confidence, to build that confidence, that self-confidence, that self-love, to be able to embark on the journey of getting more comfortable with who I am.
Yeah, yeah, and I've also noticed what you say. I have noticed that in a lot of homes, the parents, they have a particular mentality of, okay, this is how my kids should be, and you have the whole idea, the whole picture about, okay, this is what they need to do and this is what they need to become when they become adults and all. And when it's something very different from what they think, it's they feel it's as though the kids have not been grateful to them for for the love they've shown all these years, and the things that they've had to sacrifice for the kids. So it becomes very conflicting after a point. And I can only imagine how difficult it must have been for you to try and explain it to your parents that this is who you are, and this is who you want to be. So I'm really sorry you had to go through all of that. I can only imagine that it should have been really painful. And I'm so happy to see you in the position that you are today, so independent, and you have your own talk show, you have your own channel, you're doing your own thing, and it's really nice to see that. And I'm sure a lot of people will get inspired with what you're doing. Yeah, I think we have a comment here. Yeah, Adelaide says, yes, our boundaries are so important. The world tells us we should allow our parents to do and say whatever, but that comes at a cost. Yeah, yeah. What would you like to say about that, Ryan?
Definitely. That definitely resonates with me because, and I remember listening to one of the earlier talks as well about sort of this kind of thought that like you can't challenge what your parents. I believe it was during Harvey's
Yeah,
in terms of like the thought of even challenging what your parents say or sort of what they expect is it's unheard of. Definitely resonated with me as well, and um, it came to a point where I had to make the decision that I was like, no, no more. I'm not going to allow you to treat me this way. And actually, during one of my last conversations with at that point, an email conversation with my mother,
mm,
I said, I will not allow you to disrespect or dishonor me, So
yeah,
it's kind of stand for myself, even if it means it's with my own parents,
yeah.
um, because I think that, like you were saying, because parents, they brought you into the world, they kind of have that expectation that's like, okay, now you're going to do what I want you to do, or you're taking my name and you're like, you're carrying on this family legacy where it's like, yes, it's great. Thanks for bringing me into the world. And now I got it from here,
Yeah.
That was a realization for me where it's like, I'm not beholden to what you want just because you're my parents, or we're in the same family. And I remember one time, this was about a year and a half ago, that my mother, she was criticizing something that I was doing or how I was sort of expressing myself. And she kind of made the point in terms of like how it might make the family look. That's kind of how she framed it. Like think about like what impact this would have in terms of the family.
Mm.
And or I don't know if I necessarily said this, but I thought definitely like this isn't about you. This isn't about the family. This is about me. So it was a very selfish kind of thought, but at the same time, it was like I'm no longer willing to, hide the true me or not express who I truly am because that might make you uncomfortable. And that you could be anybody, not just family. You meaning,
Yeah.
I.
Yeah, no, I've seen the same thing I've seen with a lot of Asian families as well. It's like, what will the society think? What will our neighbors say? What will this person say? I really hope my parents are watching this. Actually, I know my sister's here, but yeah, it's that's definitely a big problem that a lot of people face when they try to come out to their parents. I mean, I think the home should be a very safe place, for children or for anyone in that household to be able to speak out very honestly, and be unapologetically yourself, and to try and be honest without having any judgment. But sadly, that's not the case with a lot of people. And I really empathize with you for what you've been through, and I think it's really great that you found your strength, and you're here now, talking about all of these experiences and the lessons that it's taught you. So that's really nice. We have another question here saying, how did you overcome the bullying? Did you have to face bullying, and how did you overcome that?
Well, if you consider the emotional abuse that I mentioned earlier, as it relates to my mother and my, that you could consider bullying in a sense because it was not regarding it wasn't respecting my identity, respecting who I am. And I did have go through that for a long period of time before I said enough. Um, so I will say, in terms of how I dealt with that, I tried to. So first of all, I will also add that I can't say enough, the impact that therapy had in my life in terms of helping me through the process of coming out, and then also gaining the confidence and the strength to say no more.
Yeah.
But I will say I definitely had to get clear for myself in terms of what I expected for myself.
Mm.
What behavior I would no longer accept, you know. And once I got clear in terms of saying, I don't allow anyone in my space who's going to disrespect me. I'm just not going to allow them to have access to me. I can imagine in some cases, that might be very difficult, if you're thinking about bullying from a community aspect in terms of like people who you might be in contact with in situations where it might not be easy possible to, fully distance yourself from them.
Yeah.
In the case of my family and in the case of this situation, I definitely had the power, to say, no, I'm not going to allow you to treat me this way. And until you understand that this is how I deserve to be treated, you will no longer have access to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So that was a very intentional decision to go back and say, and I see Adelaide with boundaries. Exactly right. Um, so that is essentially it. If you have someone who's bullying you, or you have a situation where you're constantly disrespected, it's up to you to make that decision that you are not going to put up with it.
Yeah.
Um, and I can, tell you it's not easy all the time.
Mm.
It was not easy to cut off my family.
Yeah.
It still is hard, even to this day. But, I value my own respect, my own self-respect more so than any, the longevity of any relationship that I might have in my life, or, whatever connection that person might have to me.
Yeah, yeah, no, definitely. And it is quite difficult when the same reaction comes from your own parents. I mean, someone who you expect to, to kind of support your life decisions and be there for you. And when you sort of face this kind of a backlash from them, it is really very deeply saddening. Where
Yeah.
where was that point that you sort of figured out that, you know what, no more, I'm not going to take this anymore? So where would you say was your breaking point there?
So the last time I went home, meaning to my hometown and my actual parents' home, was about a year and a half ago. And during that visit, I distinctly remember kind of getting that sense of like, I'm feeling like I'm getting to that point. Like I had almost like a standoff moment with my mother during that trip where there were a couple of periods where it was very tense. And I remember one period especially where it felt very adversarial. And even though like we had like disagreements around it before, it got to the point where I felt like this is on a whole nother level now. And then about a month after that, I remember actually during our last phone conversation, I just remember just getting a barrage of just like questions around like, my identity that clearly were meant to denigrate, my sense of self-worth and to make me second guess my self-worth in terms of what I deserve, you
Mm,
know. And I honestly didn't even think in that conversation that was going to be it.
mm,
But I remember like after hanging up the phone, I was like, I can't deal with this anymore. And I just made the decision that I wasn't going to engage anymore. Now, I have communicated a few times since then, not by phone, but I have communicated a few times since then. But it took a very, very long time for me to even get to the point of being willing to even allow there to be any communication.
mm.
And I'm at that point of not allowing there to be any communication.
Yeah.
Um, even though I did allow that access to occur again, I saw that she was still in a place of not willing to be respectful of who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And after making that clear, that is what I expect.
Mm.
So I made that clear, I said, okay, I can't deal with you anymore in that regard.
Yeah. No, that is actually very brave of you to do that. It would have taken a lot of strength to be able to do that for your own mental health. I think it's very important, to focus on that aspect of it as well, which sometimes is overlooked. I think, especially like, for the LGBTQ community or for people of color, and the mental health aspect of it is not talked about enough. So I think that has to be, focused on, and should be, highlighted even more, like in bold everywhere, you know. So as being, identifying yourself as LGBTQ and also of people of color, what was the challenges that you faced after like cutting yourself off from your family, and when you started saying no more, this is who I am, this is how my life is going to be. So what were the challenges that you faced?
So I would say, because I decided to give up my biological family in that sense,
Mm.
I had to get clear about who was going to now become my family.
Yeah.
And though I did have a few people who were supportive, I still felt very isolated.
Mm.
And with that, I had to become more intentional about going outside of the places that I usually found myself. And I'll go back a little bit more even before that. The community that I was raised in was a very, very strictly religious community. And usually the steps were the places that I found myself in different cities that I moved to after the community where I was raised were typically centered around the church. So in addition to, of course, giving up my family, or at least the connection that I had with my immediate family, I also made the decision to disconnect from the church community that I also had as a major part of my support system leading up to that point. And with that, as I mentioned, it was very isolating. So in a sense, it made me, and that kind of, it catalyzed, if you will, that, identity formation, because then it was like, okay, now I'm sort of like, not necessarily all by myself, but like I have to use this period that I'm feeling isolated to really think about, okay, who are going to be my people, And at the time I was living in Baltimore, Maryland, and I remembered really making it a point to like search out people within that community, whether it was through, events that were through like the local health department, or, other sort of local LGBT sort of oriented groups, to really try to find who my new family would be.
Yeah.
And it took time, it wasn't an overnight process. And, certainly I still felt isolated at times, especially as it relates to, not to sort of stay on the situation of being estranged from my family, but even that in and of itself could be seen as, a stigmatizing characteristic,
Yeah.
something that a lot of people don't necessarily have in common, that it's hard to necessarily find people to relate on that level. But I will say that allowing myself or putting myself out there more allowed me to meet more people who, had some similarities in their upbringings, not only in terms of being out and gay, but just, people who I could relate to on a really deep level that I was able to find there locally. And then also in the process of coming out, and this is probably one of the most beautiful things, is I ended up reconnecting with people who I had been friends with before in another context, who now that I was in the space of being out, and they didn't necessarily have to be gay, but they provided just an overwhelming amount of support, which was just so appreciated and so well needed at that time. And I don't know if those connections would have been rekindled had I not made the decision to come out, because that really deepened the bond with those individuals in a way that, was just so amazing. So yeah, that's what I would say kind of like was the process that, panned out, if you will, after I, decided to really get clear about my identity formation within the last year.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I can only imagine it would have been really difficult to try and, form, people of your own again, like I think Adelaide mentioned finding your tribe, but I'm so glad that that you've actually found that now. And, it's really nice. And I think someone has also, yeah, Harvey's mentioned conversations like this should be a regular part of professional training schemes across all sectors. I think he's mentioning the mental health aspect of it. It would change the approach to questions, respect, and no doubt improve health outcomes for LGBTQ plus people of color accessing professional services. Yes, definitely.
Absolutely.
I think someone else says disconnecting from church, another level of freedom and growth. So do you feel that way?
Yes, I just use praise hands or praise in that context. Um, uh, and that was so hard.
Mm.
That was so hard. And I literally, like, the first year I spent in therapy was essentially centered around how do I reconcile my spiritual faith or my religious denominational connection with my sexuality. um, and it took me about a year to realize that for me, they were not going to be possible to connect together. And it was a very slow fade for me from church. Like, it ended up, like, I was going every week, then I was going maybe every other week, then once a month, then I decided not to go anymore. So I feel like I just kind of like slowly distanced myself from the church. And I will say that in the process of doing that, I still try to maintain somewhat of a spiritual, for myself, a spiritual grounding, which may or may not have been necessarily like reading a Bible. And it usually was not. Like, I apologize to anyone out there who's very religious, but I have not read my Bible in I don't know how long. Like, for me to pull out my Bible now, I just have to blow all the dust that probably is collected on it because it's just been that long. But yeah, I mean, that said, like, I replaced it with what I felt was a spiritual grounding that worked for me. And that to me felt even more valuable than the, decades that I spent going to church every week. Like, it just felt like it was almost like a new spiritual awakening, having gone through the process of leaving church, leaving the expectations around what it meant to attend church, and then deciding that I'm going to live in the identity that is my own identity. That in and of itself was much more profound than any sermon or any connection that church could have ever given me and has given me. So, even though it was hard initially to make that transition, one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life.
Yeah, no, I can imagine, like, for someone who's always gone to church and done all of that, and you have to give that up at some point. It is quite different. I mean, you are also trying to find your space, to try and figure out all the other aspects that's surrounding. And I think it is very important, and it's a very important message that you gave, that through the journey, just leave everything, just keep pushing things back that brings in a lot of negative energy into your life, and it takes a toll on your mental health, on your happiness, and on your peace of mind. And I think that's really very important, and people should focus on that a lot. Yeah.
Can I add something really quick? And I hope this isn't oversharing, but I will say that since this is National Coming Out Day, I will say that one of the main events in my life that kind of propelled me towards coming out was falling in love with someone. And unfortunately, that never like materialized into an actual relationship. But I will say that that guy who I fell in love with was in church.
Oh,
So, and I don't use that example, or I don't say that necessarily
yeah,
to say that that was the reason why I left church. But I just thought it was interesting that that happened in the context of church, or in the location of church,
yeah,
being that, that seems so antithetical to have that happen, that was where that connection happened. And that connection, was really what kind of fueled my desire to really get more in tune with who I am,
mm,
and then live more authentically and live out and proud. So in a sense, it was kind of like a blessing, for me to have had that journey, because even though it was very convoluted, like it led me down the path that I needed to go down.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. And Adelaide also says it's such a shame that there often has to be an emancipation from church because of how ingrained it is in community culture for self-preservation.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
It, it's hard too, because like I recognize, of course, that there are a lot of gay people in church, like it's not like, I mean, I don't know, of course, numbers, of course, that probably won't ever get out, or that's not necessarily something that people are going to survey in terms of how many people in churches are gay or in the LGBTQ community. But, I know that there are a lot of us, that still attend church, attend regularly. And, church can provide a sense of community and a sense of togetherness that is that can feel very familiar for people. So, even though I made the decision for myself, as I understand that some of you have as well, that church was not the place for us, I still try to keep in mind that for a lot of people, church is really the only community that they really know. And that was for me the case for a very long time as well. And I was talking to someone who recently decided to come out as well. And, they also are in a very, they were raised in a very similar church environment. And, of course, I'm not going to say, well, you need to leave church, because like there can be a lot of connections and relationships that can be very valuable, that can be developed, in that setting. But I will say that with that said, as you are just saying, and has I've alluded to and others have agreed on, is that, being in that community, I knew that I was not going to be fully embraced. And you can find churches in which you can be fully embraced, so that's also a possibility. But in my particular church community where I was raised, that was not possible. And I knew that that wasn't possible. And that was the reason that I decided to leave.
yeah, yeah. No, it definitely, like, it does make sense now that you've explained, what the situation is. Because if you had gone on to tell someone when they asked you, okay, so what religion do you practice, and then you say, no, I don't. I mean, they're going to definitely give you a judgmental look. It's like, oh, and so only when you explain about what you've actually been through, and what you've faced, only then I think people will really understand the true the whole experience of not being able to go to church, even though you would have wanted to, um yeah. Oh, so Javi says those church crushes were the worst. So it looks like he's had a couple.
I know. The worst. Absolutely.
Yeah. Then Adelaide says it's oh, they're ready to take a survey to see how many people are there in church. So yeah, that would actually be quite interesting. Yeah. You've talked about a lot of your challenges and how you overcome that. Um, was there was there a sort of was there something that you actually look forward to, that that gave you the strength, that they gave you the courage to, move forward and to try and to achieve what you have today, and to try and say, okay, I can do this on my own. I don't want negative people around me. I am strong and I can do it on my own. So where was that inspiration? Like,
I would say looking up to and following the progress of usually celebrities who are um, and who are Black. So like for me, Billy Porter is someone who, you know, it is interesting. I actually attended a concert. This was maybe 2 or 3 years ago, which is when I first found out about Billy Porter and he was performing. And at the time, of course I was sort of in that initial coming out period, so I wasn't fully out, but I mean, I didn't fully grasp just the way in which he just embodies exactly what it is that I aspire toward. Because at that time, I just wasn't ready to receive it. But now, like, being in the space that I am now, like looking at his journey and just hearing him speak about his journey and just like seeing the level of confidence that he displays, and then also seeing the level of success that he's had, like seeing people like that is just so inspiring. And I have to show it. So I have a friend who, and she's on the call, I just saw her earlier. She actually sent this to me for my birthday. It's Billy Porter right here.
yeah.
Um, who actually, apparently someone drew this from the UK. So she had it delivered to her in the States here. And she actually had this made for me just because she knows how much that I love Billy Porter. And her name is Tristan. And I think she is on the call right now. But that's one of the examples of people that I have looked up to and that have given me the courage to say that like it is possible for me to have a role model, and I can aspire towards continuing to be successful, in all aspects of my life, even as I live out as a gay man and embracing my identity. So yeah.
Oh, that's really sweet of your friend to do that. That's also a really nice picture.
Yeah.
No, I can. It's nice to look up to someone and to be inspired by them, and I'm sure a lot of people are inspired by you today. Because going through all of those difficulties and facing all of those challenges, it would have been very easy for you to kind of move the other path, and kind of fall victim to all of those negative energies, and become someone completely opposite to who you are today. So that's really nice that you found that strength, and you're here today with us. And I'm also sure that without the experiences and the challenges that you faced throughout your life, you wouldn't be here in this position that you are now, with so much of wisdom and so much of knowledge to share with all of us. So that's really, really nice. What would have been something that you would have wanted to happen a little differently? Like, if there was just that one thing, if it happened a little differently, I might have not gone through, such difficult moments in my life. Is there something like that?
Hmm. I'm having to think about that. That's a really deep question. I don't necessarily like to think about my life or reflect back on my life with regrets, because I have, for the most part, had a lot of privilege and have grown up with a lot of privilege. Um, if anything were different, and this is, it's interesting growing up in the space that I grew up in. As I mentioned, very conservative, religious, um, background, and that definitely influenced my worldview and sort of what I saw for myself in terms of like what options were possible for me, not even just like, identity wise, but just, like sexual identity, but just like all the other things that are possible for me. And I'm now getting that awareness. I now understand like what all is possible for me outside of like what the traditional sort of career paths or, any other life paths that you could consider, I now have a lot more awareness of sort of what all the other options are for me. And I feel like if I did not grow up in in an environment or in a community that was so insular in the sense that all of those other options weren't readily available or readily put forth, I may have possibly gone in a different direction or in a direction that really felt right for me earlier on. But I don't know if I would necessarily consider that a regret because I'm now here. Even though it took some turns here and there, which I feel like all were for a purpose, I've now gotten to the point where I understand what's possible.
Yeah.
And it would not have, in a sense, it's made it even more beautiful to get to where I am now, having gone through everything that I've gone through before, having the experiences that I've had before.
Yes.
So that makes it even more valuable to have that perspective, or have those perspectives, and then be able to come to the awareness that I'm having now.
Yeah, that was really beautifully said. I mean, I think King would agree with me that this was your pageant speech, like he said last time. And Harvey says that's your graduation speech. Yeah, yeah, I'm sure. You have faced, like you said, like a lot of challenges with yourself as well, to try and discover who you are. What would you tell your younger self now?
I would say continue to believe in yourself, continue to trust yourself, or I would say trust yourself.
Yeah.
Trust that what you want for yourself and that how you want it to happen is the best for you.
Yeah.
And don't rely on other people to tell you what's the best option for you, because you are the only person who knows that.
Yeah, that's a really beautiful message, and I think a lot of people could use that now as well. Not just young people, but just everyone around there. That's a really beautiful message. Given the time that we are in now, the things that's happening around us, I think it's really very important for people, like you said. Just trust yourself, like just believe in yourself, and there's definitely going to be a lot of positivity, I hope. We do need a lot of positivity now. What are the challenges that you particularly face? Because before this we had people from the UK speak to us about all of this. Being in the US, do you think is it even more challenging given the situation that is there in the US, and compared to UK? I don't know much, but do you think it's more there? It's more challenging there in the US?
Challenging in the sense of what exactly?
Challenging in the sense of being able to come out in a safe place, being able to identify as LGBTQ, and being able to identify as LGBTQ people of color. So there's a lot of challenges there, I believe. I mean, just from the news that we hear, the news that we see, the things that we see around. So how has that been for you, those challenges?
Yeah, I can't really compare it to the UK. I'm not really sure sort of what the experience is fully there, but I could definitely say that there's variability across the board in terms of what coming out looks like, and what comfort level each person will experience or have in terms of their coming out process throughout the United States. I think that it's very dependent on a lot of other factors. I think the community in which you're raised, the family that you're raised in, what kinds of things you're exposed to. And I think a lot of those things influence, regardless of where you live, what is considered or how your coming out process might go. I can say that, there are a lot of, you probably know, a lot of stories that are, very happy stories, very happy coming out stories. Parents are very supportive, community's very supportive. It's almost just like, everything's good. And you could have someone in the very same community who has a totally different story. Um, so, I've already talked a little bit about, my background, and I can say that the factors that I was raised in contributed to my coming out, delaying it, and then also for it not necessarily going all the way positive, and not to say that every person I came out to, I had a negative reaction, because I had a lot of positive reactions. A lot of my friends who I've come out to are here, and I've seen their comments. But yeah, it's so dependent on a lot of variables outside of location.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. Like Adelaide, she says that we certainly have legal protections here, which are of some benefit. So do you think that's something that could be even more strengthened there in the US, for you to feel safe?
It's interesting Adelaide mentioned that, because with the United States right now, and I don't know if you're familiar, so there's a big debate that's going on with our Supreme Court. So over the last couple of years, the current presidential administration has been trying to do a lot to backtrack on a lot of the protections, the legal protections that members of the LGBT community have been able to realize over the last few years, especially as it relates to transgender protections. That's been a major issue that the country now is facing, in terms of, like, of course, yes, we've made a lot of progress, in terms of, like, gay people being able to get married. That was a struggle in and of itself, but now we're here. But there's still a lot of people within the country who are actively fighting to try to reverse a lot of those progresses. So that is happening even now. And as I was mentioning the Supreme Court, the current administration is really trying to push through a new justice, now that one of our previous justices passed away a few weeks ago, right before a presidential election. And that would essentially stack the court with conservative justices that could do a lot, to impact the legal protections that we face, or that we have as LGBTQ individuals in our country for years to come. So it is major. It is really major, and I encourage the people who are here on the chat, who are in the United States, to definitely advocate for making sure that those protections remain for people in the LGBTQ plus community, because there's nothing that is set in stone right now. Anything could happen, anything could change without the community at large really pushing to make sure that our humanity as LGBTQ plus community members is maintained.
Yeah, definitely. That's something that people should actually think about, and to try and to figure out something that works works around this context. And I hear a lot of I mean, like, just from the news, and people writing articles and all, and they say being Black and being gay is the worst thing that you can be in the US. So I mean, do you think that's something that's very generalized, or do you think it's not the right thing to say, or what do you think about that?
Well, I don't think of myself as being the worst in terms of those two identifiers, but I can definitely understand that sentiment, because if you think about just marginalized populations in general, like, Black people are very marginalized, gay people are very marginalized, and you look at the intersection, like, you have the marginalization of two communities in one, so I can understand how, that I can definitely understand that sentiment, in terms of like the impact that can have and does have on people who are, Black people who are in the LGBTQ plus community. So there is still a lot of work that needs to be done.
Yeah.
Still a lot of work. That work is being done, in Black Beetle Health, I think is really doing some amazing work in that regard.
Thank you.
And yeah, and I hope that impact continues to spread, because it's so much needed.
Yeah, definitely. Ooh, that was a lot of heavy talking, I think. Yeah, I just want to. I think we are almost an hour into the conversation. It didn't seem like an hour. Yeah.
Goodbye.
Yeah, I just want to end on a positive note. So, what would you like to tell to all the young kids, all the young people who are struggling to find their identity and struggling to find a place for themselves? What would you like to tell them?
I would say that living your authentic life, making the decision to come out, is a major decision. It's also a privilege for others to be let in. I think that that's one of the things that has been discussed before, in terms of like the terminology of coming out. In a sense that, really you're letting other people in to you and your identity by sharing or choosing to disclose your sexuality. So it's a privilege for other people to be let in to knowing that information about you. And though I do recognize that for a lot of young people, they might be in situations where it's unsafe for them to come out, or it's unsafe for them to let other people know that they're gay, or that they're lesbian, that they're considering transitioning, or that they are transgender. And I understand that. And I want people to understand that it's okay to take time. You don't have to rush the process. I mentioned earlier, I came out at age 29, which wasn't necessarily a choice that I made, but for it to be that long. But it's okay if you allow some years to pass until you feel like you're in a community in which you are supported and you feel safe. It's okay for you to take the time to make sure that you have the support around you that you need in order to feel comfortable, and then allowing people in.
Yeah.
So that's probably what I would say, to someone who's, sort of considering, the journey of coming out, to just take your time. There's no rush. But then once you do make that decision, regardless of what challenges might happen along the way, I can say from personal experience, definitely the best decision I ever made in my entire life.
Oh, that is so beautiful. That is so beautiful. And like Adelaide says, have a national letting in day. Huh, that's interesting.
That's it.
That's really interesting. I wish we could talk more, because it's been a really interesting session with you, and I really hope we are able to collaborate again on an Instagram live, or something. It's really very interesting talking to you. I learned a lot from you today, and you've been really inspirational, and it's I feel motivated, in a way, and yeah, and I really, really hope that we get to work together again. I think that you have a lot of knowledge that you can share with us, a lot of wisdom that you've gathered through the years, and we would like to hear a lot about them. So thank you so much for joining us today, Ryan. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Samya, and thank you to Black Beetle Health for this series of talks today. It's such a privilege to participate in this with you, and to celebrate this day. And I just really am just very, very pleased that I would be invited to share this time with you. I really enjoyed this time as well, and hope that we can collaborate again in the future as well.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, Ryan. Thank you so much for your time, and have a lovely rest of the day.
Thank you. You as well.
Yeah.
Bye.
So much. Bye bye. See you soon. Thanks to everyone who tuned in today. And we have all the talks stored as IG lives. I mean, IG in the IGTV section, so you can go back and look at it. Thank you once again, Ryan.
Thank you, Samya.
Bye bye.
Bye.